Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Adam Interviews. I always find myself so fortunate to have the job that I have because I get to meet spectacular people in the community. This week, I've had the great fortune of meeting people who are visiting our community as part of the Soundtracks Film Music Festival. Some of the people who have created the soundtrack of our lives. The biggest movies you can imagine, they've had a hand in. Obviously, when we think of this genre, this industry, we immediately think of John Williams. A lot of the people I've interviewed this week have known John Williams. They know him. They're friends with him. They call him John as opposed to Mr. Williams. I mean, those are the types of people that we're talking to today. And in the mix right now, we're so happy to invite to Studio B here on 201 Humboldt Street. We have Conrad Pope and Nan Schwartz, both of them within this music industry. Conrad, Nan, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Real pleasure to be here, Adam. Thanks for having us.
Of course. So there's going to be a panel, and Conrad, Nan, you are going to be talking on Saturday, tomorrow. Boy, the time moves fast when you're having fun. And Conrad, why don't we talk about when we call you an orchestrator, right? So I didn't fully appreciate this. Is it that you have the composer in certain circumstances write a simple score for maybe 1, 2, and then you kind of take it and work it from there? What does that mean when we say orchestrator?
An orchestrator is really somebody that is an assistant to a composer, and you have to be prepared to do whatever the composer needs. And so you'll have various cases where, in an extreme case, like when I've worked for John Williams provides a very, very detailed sketch. In fact, I wouldn't even call it a sketch, and not to get too much into the weeds. It's more like a short score, is that he writes on 8 lines and he almost indicates everything that you need to know to put this in the orchestra. As my mentor, Arthur Morton, who was an orchestrator for a lot of very famous composers, he said, my job as an orchestrator is we take it from the white paper and put it on the yellow paper. And so the white paper is the small stuff, and then the yellow paper is the big orchestral stuff. And with John Williams, there's every detail that is taken care of, and you just have to pay attention to realize that. By the same token, I've worked for composers where, without exaggeration, they needed a little bit more help than that, and I've gotten just only 4 bars of 1 line that needed to be expanded into 3 minutes. That was back in the day. And so an orchestrator is really somebody that does whatever the composer needs to get done to have the score recorded. And that goes from that whole range of just paying close attention to supplying some things that the composer might need in addition to that. And that's been true since Max Steiner was working on even Gone with the Wind, because orchestrators back in those days, it was a team. And Max Steiner's team had Hugo Friedhofer and a number of people, where Hugo Friedhofer actually wrote the opening of Gone with the Wind. And he did everything, but Steiner gave the themes and Hugo Friedhofer gave the form. And so when you're dealing with massive amounts of music, and it takes a time to do this, you need somebody like an orchestrator at times to jump in and do what needs to be done that the composer hasn't got time to do.
That's remarkable. And I want to get back to you eventually. I want to talk about how you do that with individual instruments, because I do find this fascinating. And when I say fascinating, mysterious, because I have no idea how it's done. But Nan, I want to address something I saw in your bio, Grammy Award-winning arranger. Talk to me about what got you that's such a prestigious award. And I think you've been nominated several times too, but you actually won. So if you wouldn't mind.
Well, arranging's always sort of been my first love. But early on, Henry Mancini took me aside and said, "Kid, don't be an arranger. There's no money in it." So I went off and became a TV composer and worked on a lot of TV shows some were on the air for a while, like Cagney and Lacey, and the big one that was on for 10 years was In the Heat of the Night. And they became, lucrative sources and creative sources for me. But after the producers discovered synthesizers at a certain point, and all the orchestral work that I was doing for these TV shows was, they got rid of the orchestras, and they just hired these guys that had synthesizers in their garage. So I somehow miraculously pivoted over to arranging, and I had been studying jazz piano and had been doing some arranging in Europe and stuff, and my teacher was the pianist for Natalie Cole.
Wow.
And he recommended me to her, and very luckily for me, she heard something on my demo that she liked, and she hired me, cold, and I came in and did 3 arrangements for her second to the last album she did. It was called Still Unforgettable. It was the follow-up to Unforgettable. And one of them won a Grammy. It's called Here's That Rainy Day.
Wow, that is it. So, by the way, before I tell you my kind of non-story about Natalie Cole, I'd love to know, for those who don't know, including myself, when you talk about orchestration, composing, and then arranging, what is the difference between arranging and those other two jobs?
Well, composing is coming up with a brand new original idea where there's just a blank piece of paper. And I think Conrad explained orchestration quite well, so I won't go into that. But in arranging, it's more of a job that's predominant in the record industry. And in my case, a lot of singers want to re-record songs from the Great American Songbook. And so it's my task to try to reimagine that music in a brand new way that hasn't been done before. Keeping the melody, but maybe altering the chords, altering the orchestration, getting more imaginative with it. And in the case of songs from the Great American Songbook, it's a great, wonderful creative challenge for me because the songs are well known by the public. And so I'm able to stretch out a little bit and put my stamp on it.
There's got to be a lot of pressure on that because it's another person's work and you want to do it justice while also elevating it or refitting it in some way.
Mm-hmm. Well, the melody is always sacrosanct, but anything else is sort of fair game, I feel.
Yeah, no, that's one. And by the way, the very small, my mom loved, like most people, loved Nat King Cole and then Natalie Cole. And we got to see her in concert in Canandaigua. And she did the famous Unforgettable song where they put Nat King Cole in the background and she sang harmony with him.
Yeah.
And it was it's really not much of a story, but this is when you said you had a part in that that song, and Natalie Cole ended up being our wedding song. So, all right, want to go back to Conrad. When you have to orchestrate, I'm always amazed that you have an entire orchestra, however many pieces. How do you go individually, or do you go individually to every instrument and say, this is what you're going to play, this is what you're going to play, and how do you figure all that out?
Well, yes, I do, and that's what the orchestrator does. In fact, if you look at the union rules of what orchestration is, it basically says the person that determines the part that the player will play.
Okay.
And so to do that, I guess the one thing I would say is that I wouldn't necessarily, yes, the orchestra is a combination of a lot of instruments, but the way I think of it, and I think that when you're writing for it, I think of it as an instrument. Unto itself. And so that I know what the sound of the orchestra is all together, what it is individually, what it means to sort of have a solo, what it means to have a tutti. I have a sort of emotional connection and musical connection to what the woodwinds sound together when they're doing it all in unison or when they're not in harmony, and through all the other choirs. And so what you first do is get an impression of what the music is to you and its emotion, and then you sort of translate that into those instrumental colors. Generally, the composer, particularly today with the synthesizers, the composers worked out most of the colors, or the basic colors, of brass, strings, and winds, because they can mock it up so they can play it for the director. And so that's a little bit of a guide. But I guess to answer your question is that it pays to know a lot of orchestral music. I have conducted, I played in an orchestra, and various things. And so when I approach it, I sort of feel like I'm a member of the orchestra, and I actually, when I'm orchestrating, I think of myself as sitting in each chair that I'm writing for and playing that instrument and what it would feel like to play it, and try to imagine myself as the performer. Because as a kid, when I was coming up, I actually made it a point in public school back in those days I knew I wanted to be a composer, so I managed to play an instrument from both the woodwind family, the brass family, and the string family, so that I know about it, not to master the instruments, but just to actually understand the psychology of it.
Yeah.
And so that's how I sort of determine these things.
That's remarkable. I heard a story, and you hear stories, I don't know how true it is, but when Paul McCartney wrote Long and Winding Road, it was originally just him, I think, in the piano, and then they orchestrated it behind his back, and it came out, and it kind of people still loved the song, but it was a lot more than what he had hoped for. He thought it was a bit more intimate of a song. Do you sometimes find yourself trying to restrain the orchestration sometimes for certain pieces where you're like, it doesn't need that booming sound?
Well, I always take my cue from the composer. I always think of myself as the composer's helper, like I was saying earlier on.
Yeah.
And so if they tell me we got to restrain it, then we do that. One project I was involved with is where I had to go to New Zealand and record for a score, and the composer couldn't be there. And I just had to execute really what the director said. And that's also part of our business, is that we're really a service to the film. And so we have to listen to the director because he knows what he wants. And so at times you'll have an orchestration that you thought was supposed to be very big, then you get to the recording session and the director sees it in the scene and he goes, oh, we've got to cut this down, we've got to do X, Y, and Z. So really your first orchestration is really just a working paper for the recording session, because everything at the recording session on a film can change drastically. But yes, I know when I should restrain it, and at times I might have to make it big, but we're prepared to do anything that needs to be done.
And do you have the orchestra on standby for this? I mean, if it's a small change, you're like, my goodness, I have to bring back the entire orchestra for this.
Well, no, you get 3 hours with them, and they get a break every 50 minutes, and so you've got to get it in that time, and that's how you in all honesty, that's how back when I first got into this, the reason I got hired again and again was that a colleague of mine once figured out that a raised hand in the orchestra, like somebody saying, is that a right note, is this the right rhythm, because of the amount, costs about $500. And so they have to ask a lot of questions. Producers don't like that. And so the way to really secure your position in Hollywood is to make sure that when your chart comes up, as we say, there are no raised hands that come up.
I love that.
And so you try to be as careful as you can, appreciating that it really is a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of pre-work involved in that. And Nan, outside of the TV that you worked on, I just want to list off some of the movies here: Jurassic World Rebirth, The Life of Pi, which is obviously such an incredible movie, Julia and Julia, Pinocchio, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which is obviously one of the best movies ever made. I have the $2 on. Hello. So Nan, my question to you is, when you're involved in that movie, do you feel like you're truly part of the whole picture, or are you really so concentrated on the music that you're not, you kind of feel like you're working in a silo, or is it a mixture of both?
Well, I think by the time we get involved, the film is shot and edited, so music is one of the last things to happen. So I would say that pretty much the focus is on the music and just trying to make sure that the composer's happy. And one thing that I'd like to plug, which is coming out today, is Frankenstein.
Ooh.
It's the new Guillermo del Toro version of Frankenstein with a score by Alexander Desplat. And Conrad was the main orchestrator, and I'm always lucky enough to work on his team. So it was very a prestigious project, and we were happy to be a part of it.
Wow. So how long have you been a team, so to speak?
Well, we've been together about 21 years now, and I was telling Alexandre, because this was a big year for us, we started the year off doing the Phoenician Scheme with Wes Anderson, with Alexandre's score, and then the next thing was Jurassic World Rebirth, and then finally in June, Frankenstein. And this is my 20th year with Alexander Desplat, which I couldn't believe, because the way I met him, if you care to know, is
please.
Doug Frank, who was president of music at Warner Brothers, called me up one day and said, Conrad, I'd like you to go and sit a session. We have a French composer coming into town, and I'm not sure he knows what he's doing. And would you mind going and sitting this session? And I said no at first, but my wife convinced me. She said, are you crazy? And so I finally said yes. I'm just truncating the story. And it was just to go and sit with the recording to Syriana and to listen to Alexandre's music and talk with him. And I wasn't sure what it was going to be like, but I knew I kind of, as a musician, fell in love with Alexander Desplat the first time I met him, because within 30 minutes we talked about Bill Evans and Toru Takemitsu. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that this was a man of extraordinary culture and musical education, and it's always a delight to work with people like that.
Yeah, when you realize they're students of the craft.
Yeah, so 20 years with Alexandre and 21 years with Nan here.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful story. Do either of you or both of you still play music recreationally?
Not publicly.
Not publicly?
No, but I play piano every day, and I took up the bass a year ago, electric bass.
Oh my goodness.
So I just entertain myself in my room.
Well, maybe one day.
Maybe it's going to have to be far away from Los Angeles in some bar out in the middle of the desert with some other equally bad musicians. But it's fun. It's fun to collaborate.
Yeah, we do have a piano in Studio A, and you're in Rochester, New York, far away from LA. I'm just saying. How about you, Conrad? Do you play at all? Or?
Not at all. That Conrad Pope retired something like 40 years ago.
Really?
Sure. Well, no, I've been really. I just remember one of my mentors, Arthur Morton, once he relayed a story that he said that he told the young John Williams at one point when John was a pianist. He said to John, he held up a pencil and he said, "Young man, I think you'll make more money with this pencil than you will with 10 fingers."
Wow.
And we've seen what the result was, but John was always on everybody's hit list from the time he was a very young man.
Yeah.
And with me, no, I won't torture anybody with, performing anymore. The only thing I do is maybe conduct the orchestra, but then they do all the work, and I just wave my hands.
Oh, incredible! So if you're just joining us, by the way, we are speaking with Nan Schwartz and Conrad Pope. They are going to be talking at 4 o'clock as one of the many great panels being held as part of the Soundtracks Film Music Festival. We're having some incredible performances. I believe we have Red Violin tonight, and then we have Harry Potter tomorrow night, and then Sunday. These are world-class professionals who are linked to the industry. And speaking of the industry, Nan, with all of the technology that's coming out, AI is such a huge subject. In fact, that's one of the panels that's being brought to the table in this festival. Is that changing your job at all at this point?
Not yet. I think that particularly singers that I work with as far as arranging are still looking for kind of a unique stamp. And I think that AI at this point is doing what's been done before, and my job as an arranger is to try to do something that hasn't been done before and bring my own kind of unique take on things. And as long as people are willing to pay for that and want that, I think I'm still okay.
Yeah, I have to imagine so. And you said you worked in TV. We've spoken with someone who was once with Nazareth University or linked to Nazareth, and he's done a number of television shows. And I'm spectacularly intrigued by, there's just so much involved, the little blips as you play out or even during a scene. How did you maintain the creativity throughout episode after episode?
I was given a lot of freedom, especially in the heat of the night. They were shooting outside of Atlanta, and everybody was there. And so I was just left to my own, I was left alone. And so I would spot the show maybe with an associate producer or somebody in Los Angeles on a Monday, and then Friday I was standing in front of the orchestra conducting. And I never really got any negative feedback, so I just kept going. And I felt that, as you get the palette of the orchestra that you're using on that show under your belt, you come up with more creative ideas each week. It just sort of builds on itself.
Yeah.
But this was back in the day. It's much different now. And this was before demos. And so I have a friend that works on a show that he's been on for 15 years, and I went over to see him, and he had to turn the score around in 2 days, and he was still getting notes after 15 years on the show. Change this, do that, and making revisions overnight. And I thought, oh boy, did I have it good.
Yeah.
No one gave me any grief. They were, the first time they ever heard the music was at the recording session.
Wow. And Heat of the Night's one of the more notable shows in the history of television too. So now that you're working on the electric bass, you can work on the Seinfeld.
I think he's quite happy in retirement. He did so many shows for Seinfeld that he had his career mapped out. After this episode, I'm retiring, and he was able to. I think he's doing really well.
All right. Was that who you were talking about? I just made the joke about Seinfeld because you're on the electric bass.
Jonathan Wolfe is the composer's name, and he I don't know what he did before Seinfeld, but once he did Seinfeld, he made enough money to just pack it in. Now, I'm sure you, I don't know if you would ask Conrad this or me, but I never want to stop writing music. You know, it's just, I don't want to retire ever. As long as there's a need for it or there's someone's interested in what I have to say, I want to keep going because it's just part of me.
Sometimes I hear that with artists. They say it's a well that it fills, and it's almost like you have to release it. It just, in whatever form it is, there's an itch that needs to be scratched. So it sounds like that may be what you're talking about, where it's like you just have to.
Well, yes, I would say so.
Yeah. Variety, or no, excuse me, it was the Hollywood Reporter, I think, described, Conrad, your music as having a subtextural punch. I know it's awkward to have someone describe a compliment, but I would love for you to kind of get into what that might mean for your music.
Well, I'll take it, though I'm not quite sure. But what I will say is that that is from a score from a long time ago. But I'll take the compliment. It just has to do with that. You're sort of playing what the scene might be about, but they might be having happy talk, but maybe it's not. This happy talk is really a ruse. They're masking their true feelings, and so underneath, the music might convey a sinister thing, or that something might be happening differently than what you're seeing on the screen. In fact, even I was thinking about what film I recently worked on in which we recorded something that sounded like a country tune. And it seemed very, nice and maybe primitive. You put it to the scene in the film, and suddenly it becomes very moving. It changes. The image and the music together give you a different impression, and that's what the subtext is. And so that's what we mean by that. Whereas, like with a cartoon, what you might do is that your music mimics what you see. And music in a film that's not a cartoon, that isn't for that, is probably trying to give some more emotional depth and texture to the film than necessarily. The music's not necessarily about what you see, but what you feel, or what you should feel.
By the way, you worked on one of my favorite trilogies, and I'm introducing it to my 13-year-old son now, The Matrix,
Yes.
the original Matrix Reloaded. What was that like to work on that particular project?
Fabulous, because Don Davis, the composer, is much like John Williams. It's always great to work in this business when you're working with somebody that knows what you do as an orchestrator, because he had been an orchestrator. He's a great composer. And his demos, his quote sketches, were out of a computer, but they were just, it's one of these things, I can't explain really my job, but when people sort of mock up the orchestra and the computer, they sometimes forget that they're writing for 1,000 instruments instead of 60. And with Don Davis, since he was very experienced as an orchestrator, his demos were perfect and were always excellent. The music was totally exciting. Just a quick story, if you don't mind.
Please,
and I
is
think
what this
there's
is
this
for.
thing called I think it's in the second Matrix film where there's a mini Mr. Smiths. There's this big fight where he's cloned and there's 1,000 Smiths that are fighting Neo. And Don wrote this amazing cue, one of the most amazing times I've had in this studio, with the brass playing these very fast runs and the orchestra going wild. And just as more Smiths came in, more of the music, and it was just one of the most amazing pieces of music I've ever heard recorded in Hollywood.
Wow.
And now here's the movie business. The Wachowski brothers, or sisters, I guess now, were in the booth, and this all went down. And all of us in the music, we were beaming, just looking at them, going like, "Wow, wasn't that something?" And even Armin Steiner, who was recording, is like, "Wasn't that something?" And they're looking down, and they go, "I think we have an idea for something else." And what they did is they replaced it with a track with from Juno Reactor. That's just a steady beat, as I recall.
Oh,
and it's one of those things of, there might be a movie that should be about the unknown music.
Oh no, that's
to the films that you didn't, and I tell you, and maybe somebody's put that together, but this happens.
I would love to see that. I know the scene. I love that scene. Neo picks up the metal pole and starts whacking them and things like that. And
you should hear what Don. And so, what was it like? It was great because when you work for Don Davis, is like working for John Williams.
Yeah.
And I wish that Hollywood would know that, because Don is just one of the most extraordinary talents
Yeah.
It's still working.
All right, one day you're gonna have to sneak me that scene with that music attached to it. Nan, I'm getting the impression that both of you just appreciate professionalism at this point. I'm sure you have all along, but while there is a magic to it and there's music that you feel like you have to play and everything like that, you both love working with people who have been in the business, who have experience and just know how to get things done.
Well, I would say that's true, particularly when you go to other parts of the world or other cities where the orchestras aren't quite on the level of London or Los Angeles. Or I had a recent experience where I was called to do an arrangement, and I wrote a big lavish arrangement for a full orchestra and got there, and the orchestra was rehearsing and it sounded very good, and then the singer that had been chosen for the project was not up to the same level at all. It turns out they were sort of doing a favor, and they gave her the role of the vocalist in this thing. And so I realized I have to get my lawyer daughter to write me into my next contract that I get approval on singers before I put my heart and soul into something that's going to get ruined, because I knew that 3 people in my world would appreciate the arrangement I wrote, and everybody else would only be able to focus on the singer, because that's where the ear goes.
Of course, I mean, any element's important, and you know the right way to do things, the way it should be. So no, I can appreciate that. What I find interesting about having you both here is a lot of things. When it comes to this festival, the roads all lead to Harry Potter. We're having the live version where the RPO is going to play the music to the movie tomorrow night and Sunday for a matinee. I believe Saturday is already sold out. So you've worked on Harry Potter, Conrad. I think yesterday Robert Townsend worked on Harry Potter. It just seems like a lot of people are gathering. Does that speak to the size of the Harry Potter universe, or just the fact that a lot of talented people are linked to it, and it might be coincidence that we have them here?
Well, I'm going to say something that's kind of let me just say, and this is true about Star Wars too.
Yeah.
Without John Williams, I think maybe there would have been a few Harry Potters, but the magic of Harry Potter is all in John Williams. And I think that without the first 3 films, there would not have been a 4th film, 5th film, or 6th film. And so, yes, I think that it was just it was a phenomenon, and John's music gave it a soul, much like it has Star Wars. And I think that's what kept the franchise going. And as I've said, is that I was fortunate enough to work for John Williams on the first 3, and then with Alexandre on the last 2. Much like I did this for years, 32 years ago since I worked on the first Jurassic Park, and then we did the Jurassic World Rebirth this time, and so I think it's just, it was one of those projects that sort of captivated our culture for a bit, and still does, and it is a very special thing, because it's very rare to find such an intelligent and engaging story that children can take, and that we can work on and have all that great music with the flying everything and the great emotion.
Yeah, well, I think that's a wonderful point to end on, because I think that's the whole point of the festival that's been created, because the folks behind it recognized that the music provides the soul to a lot of movies and the heartbeat. So I appreciate the work that you've done over the years to help us connect with those stories. And I'm just so grateful you came here. And I want to let folks know once again that you can hear Conrad and Nan talk at their own panel tomorrow at 4. It's free, open to the public, I believe, over at Kilbourne Hall. Right on Gibbs Street, super accessible and a lovely place. And then, of course, we've got Harry Potter that night. So again, Conrad, Nan, thank you so much for your time and everything you've done for us as an audience.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Honor.
Oh, wonderful. Well, so again, we've been listening to Conrad Pope and Nan Schwartz, 2 of the greats out in LA doing the work that we've all come to love. And they've just been 2 of several who have given us their time over the week. So we're very happy there. I want to thank everyone with Soundtracks Film Music Festival, Dresden Angle, for helping to set all of this up for us. And I want to thank you for watching. And as I always say, tell your friends about the Rochester First app. We are delivering these in-depth interviews that you really can't find most other places. And Also gives you maybe a date night idea as well. So a lot of good stuff happening there. With that, I want to wish you all well, and I hope that you have a great weekend that involves maybe some great music. Take care, everyone.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.